My name is Raphael, and I've been working as a financial analyst for 6 years. Every day is pretty much the same. Spreadsheets, reports, reheated coffee in the same stained white mug. My life had a predictable routine, almost comforting in its monotony. But there are moments in life when you look back and realize exactly when everything changed. For me, that moment happened on an ordinary Tuesday, when my car engine started making a strange noise on the commute to work. Have you ever had that feeling that something is going to break your routine irreversibly? That inexplicable premonition that your life is about to take a completely different turn? I ignored the metallic noise coming from the hood for 3 days. I tried to convince myself it was normal, that maybe it was just the engine running hotter than usual. But on Thursday morning, when thin smoke started coming out from the sides, I could no longer put it off. I needed a mechanic. I don't usually trust just any garage. I've had bad experiences, you know? Those places that invent problems that don't exist just to bump up the bill. But a colleague recommended a small, independent garage on the other side of town. Marcelo is reliable. You can trust him, he said. And the place is honest. When I arrived there that morning, the first thing that hit me was the smell. A mixture of burnt oil, heated metal, and that distinctive odor of old tires. The kind of smell that clings to your clothes and you notice hours later. The garage was small, with 2 hydraulic lifts holding cars in various stages of repair. Tools hanging on metal panels organized with that obsessive precision that only people who work with their hands can maintain. The radio was quietly playing a country song I didn't recognize. There was nobody at the reception. Just a small table with a clipboard full of crumpled work orders and a pen attached by a string. I hesitated for a moment, unsure whether I should honk or simply wait. That's when I heard footsteps coming from behind a red car raised on the lift. And then I saw him. Marcelo appeared from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag already stained with grease. He wore navy blue overalls with his name embroidered on the chest, but the zipper was pulled down below his chest, revealing a white t-shirt that outlined a body clearly accustomed to physical work. He had slightly disheveled dark hair, 2 or 3 days' worth of stubble, and those brown eyes that seemed perpetually tired but alert. He must have been in his early 30s, maybe my age or a little older. "Good morning, can I help you?" The voice was deep, direct, but not rude. The kind of voice of someone used to solving practical problems, no beating around the bush. I explained about the noise and the smoke, trying to sound technical and failing miserably. He listened attentively, asking specific questions about when the problem started, whether there was any loss of power, whether the noise changed when I accelerated. There was something about the way he asked these questions, with total concentration, that made me a bit nervous, as if he were assessing not just the car, but me as well. "Let's take a look," he said, signaling for me to open the hood. I stood beside him as he leaned over the engine, his grease-stained hands touching parts with a familiarity that bordered on intimate. He knew exactly where to place his fingers, how to test the tension of the belts, how to identify almost invisible leaks. There was a competence in those movements that I found strangely fascinating. I work with numbers, with abstractions. He worked with real, tangible things that could be fixed with his own hands. "Your timing belt is at its limit," he said without looking at me, focused on the engine. "And you have a small leak here in the radiator. Nothing serious yet, but you'll need to replace it soon or you might blow the engine." The way he explained was educational, but not condescending. He showed me exactly where the problem was, pointed to the worn parts. There wasn't that typical arrogance of someone who knows more than you and makes a point of showing it. There was just competence, natural authority. "How long will it take to fix?" I asked, already mentally reorganizing my day's schedule. "About 3 hours. I've got the parts in stock. I can get started straight away if you'd like." He finally looked at me directly when he said that, and something strange happened. It was just a second, maybe 2. Our eyes met, and there was an imperceptible pause, a microscopic silence in which something passed between us that I couldn't name at the time. It wasn't exactly attraction, or at least it wasn't just that. It was recognition, as if some deep part of me had identified some deep part of him. He looked away first, returning his attention to the engine. "Go ahead," I responded, perhaps too quickly. "I need the car back today." "No problem. Leave it to me." There was a small cafe on the corner, and I spent the next 3 hours alternating between answering emails on my phone and gazing distractedly out the window towards the garage. I couldn't concentrate. My thoughts kept returning to that moment under the bonnet, to his hands touching the engine, to that strange pause when our eyes met. I found myself thinking about absurd details. The way he slightly furrowed his brow when concentrating, the grease smudge on the left side of his neck that he probably didn't even know was there, the way he held his tools, with that casual confidence of someone who'd done the same movement thousands of times. Why was I thinking about this? It was ridiculous. He was my mechanic. I was a customer. Simple as that. Besides, he was definitely straight. Had all the external markers, the manual labor, the overalls, the garage full of car posters and tools. I was projecting, creating connections where there were none. It was my usual habit since adolescence, seeing signs where there was only professional courtesy. When I came back to pick up the car, Marcelo was washing his hands in an outdoor sink, scrubbing hard to remove the more stubborn grease. He saw me arrive and nodded, drying his hands on a less dirty rag. "All done. Changed the belt, fixed the leak, and gave it a proper once-over. Should run smoothly now." He handed me the key and our fingers touched briefly. It was completely accidental, but I felt like I'd received a small electric shock. Ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. "How much?" I asked, trying to sound professional, normal. He handed me a handwritten estimate on graph paper. The price was fair, even lower than I expected. I paid by card, signed the receipt, thanked him professionally, all very correct, very proper. But when I was about to get in the car, he said something that caught me completely off guard. "Do you work around here?" The question was casual, asked while he was putting away the card machine. But there was something in the way he asked it, in a slightly different tone, that made my heart race. "No, I work on the other side of town. Came on a friend's recommendation." "Ah, I see." He seemed to consider something for a moment, then added, "Any problems? Any strange noises? You can come back. Sometimes these belts take a few days to settle in properly." "Okay, thanks. I'll keep an eye out." I got in the car, started the engine. It really was quieter, smoother. He'd done a good job. I waved as I left, and he returned it with a simple hand gesture, already turning back to the shop. All the way back to the office, I tried to convince myself that it had just been a visit to the mechanic. Routine. Unimportant. But part of me knew I was lying. There was something there, in that brief encounter, that had affected me in a way I couldn't completely ignore. Have you ever met someone and felt like there was something unspoken hanging in the air? That feeling that there's an entire conversation happening beneath the surface, in silences and glances? I spent the next few days trying to forget, returned to my routine, spreadsheets, meetings, endless reports. But now and then my thoughts would return to that garage, to that mechanic with grease-stained hands and attentive eyes. I caught myself imagining conversations that never happened, creating mental excuses to go back there. And then, on a Monday morning, 2 weeks later, the check engine light came on the dashboard. My first thought wasn't concern about the car. It was a strange mix of apprehension and anticipation, as if some part of me had been waiting for an excuse, a legitimate reason to go back. I could have gone to any garage closer to work. There were at least 3 on my route. But when I picked up my phone to search for mechanics, I found myself typing the address of that small garage on the other side of town, the same one I'd visited 2 weeks ago. I turned off my phone and put it away. I wasn't going to call to make an appointment. I'd just show up. It was more natural that way, less planned. Just a customer returning to the mechanic who already knew his car. Nothing major. Perfectly normal. But as I drove towards the garage, with the yellow check engine light blinking softly on the dashboard, I knew I was lying to myself. Knew this wasn't an ordinary visit. Knew I was looking for something that maybe didn't even exist. And still, I couldn't make my foot turn the wheel in another direction. The garage was busier this time. There were 2 cars waiting outside, and I could hear the sound of power tools coming from inside. I parked to the side and waited. watching through the window. Marcelo appeared a few minutes later, still in the same navy blue overalls, wiping his hands on that eternally stained rag. He saw me through the glass, and there was a moment brief but undeniable when his expression changed. It wasn't just professional recognition. It was something closer to satisfaction, interest, or was I projecting again, seeing what I wanted to see? I got out of the car, and he approached, and it was as if the last 2 weeks hadn't existed, as if there was a natural continuity between that first encounter and this one. "Problems again?" he asked, but there was a small smile at the corner of his mouth, as if he knew something I didn't. "The engine light came on," I said, pointing to the dashboard. "You said to come back if anything unusual happened." "I did." He came closer, looked through the car window at the illuminated dashboard. He was close enough for me to smell him. A mix of basic soap, motor oil, and clean sweat. A smell completely different from the sterile environment of my office, but one that somehow seemed more honest to me, more real. "Let's see what it is," he said, stepping back. "Can you pop the hood for me?" And there we were again. Him leaning over my car's engine, me standing beside him trying to look interested in the technical explanations while secretly watching his movements, the way his muscles shifted under his t-shirt when he reached for parts deeper in the engine. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was creating a fantasy where there was only professionalism, that he probably had a girlfriend, maybe even a wife, and that I was just another customer in the endless procession of cars that came through his hands every day. But then he looked at me over the engine. Our eyes met again, and this time the pause was a little longer. 1 second more than would be socially necessary. And in that extra second, in that charged silence, I became absolutely certain I wasn't imagining it. There was something there, something unspoken, unacknowledged, but definitely present, hovering between us like the thin smoke that had come from my car's engine weeks ago. The question was, what was I going to do about it? So there I was, 3 days later, back at the garage. The check engine light had come on again the night before. Or at least that's what I told myself. The truth. I could have gone to any garage. There was one 2 blocks from my house. But I drove 20 minutes to that specific garage, to that specific mechanic. When I parked, I felt my stomach tighten. What kind of person makes up excuses to come back to a repair shop? But before I could question my mental sanity, he appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. And when he saw me, something happened that made my heart race. He smiled. It wasn't a professional smile. It was a smile of recognition, of, "Oh, you're back." As if my presence there meant something. "Check engine light again?" he asked, approaching the car. "Yeah, I don't know what's going on," I lied, trying to sound frustrated instead of nervous. He opened the bonnet with that ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times, and I stood there, next to him, pretending to understand something about engines while he checked cables and connections. The smell of grease and metal mixed with his cologne something woody, subtle, created a strange combination that my brain was filing away as comforting. "It's going to take about 40 minutes, he said, without taking his eyes off the engine. "I need to run some diagnostic tests on the computer. You can wait inside if you like. There's coffee." 40 minutes. 40 minutes of waiting that I should have found inconvenient, but that sounded like an opportunity. I sat in a plastic chair in the small waiting area while he worked. From where I was, I could see him through the glass door leading to the garage, the way he moved, that total concentration when he was under the car, his hands firm, precise. I grabbed my phone to distract myself, but my eyes always came back to him. At some point, he came in to get a tool and our eyes met. For a second, just a second, he looked confused, curious, as if he'd noticed I was watching and didn't quite know what to do with that information. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes, yeah, just bored," I answered too quickly. He gave a low laugh. "A garage isn't exactly the most thrilling place to spend your afternoon. I've seen worse." And then something unexpected happened. He pulled up a chair and sat next to me. Didn't go straight back to the car. Sat down, as if those minutes with me were worth more than the work outside. "Do you work around here?" he asked in a casual tone, but there was something genuine in the question. "About 20 minutes away. I'm a history teacher." "Really?" His eyes lit up with real interest. That's cool. I always found history fascinating, but I was never good with dates. History isn't about memorizing dates, I said, and I felt a smile appear on my face. It's about understanding why people do what they do. The motivations, the fears, the hidden desires. He looked at me differently then, as if I'd said something that resonated deeper than it should have. Yeah, he murmured. Hidden motivations. We sat in silence for a few seconds, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people are thinking the same thing, but neither has the courage to say it. And you? I asked, breaking the moment. Did you always want to be a mechanic? He shrugged. My dad had a garage. I learned from him since I was a kid. It's honest work, you know. You fix something broken, the person leaves happy. As simple as that. Not everything broken can be fixed, I said, and I don't know where that came from. He looked me in the eyes, and I swear I saw something shift in that gaze. Something vulnerable. No, he agreed softly, but sometimes you try anyway. The moment was broken by the sound of the diagnostic computer beeping in the shop. He stood up, ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture that didn't match the confidence he normally exuded, and went back to work. When I left there, 40 minutes later, with the car fixed and a bill much cheaper than it should have been, I knew I'd be back. And I came back. The next week, it was a strange noise in the brakes. 2 weeks later, a routine inspection. A month later, my air conditioning was low. There was always something, and each time I showed up, that smile of recognition got a little wider, the conversation time a little longer. It was on the 4th visit that things truly started to change. I arrived on a rainy day without warning because my windscreen wiper had stopped working in the middle of the downpour. I was soaked when I walked into the garage, dripping water onto the concrete floor. "Bloody hell," he said when he saw me, and for the first time I heard real concern in his voice. "You're drenched." The wiper stopped in the middle of the rain. I could barely see to get here. Without saying anything, he went to a cabinet in the back and returned with a towel. It wasn't new, had grease stains, but it was clean and smelled like washing powder. He handed it to me and stood there, watching, while I dried my face and hair. "Thank you," I said. "You drive 20 minutes through a storm to come here instead of going to the garage near your house?" My heart went cold. He knew. Of course he knew. I had mentioned where I lived in one of our conversations. He had been paying attention. "I trust your work," was all I could manage to say. He looked at me for a long moment, and there were so many unspoken things in that gaze that I felt the air grow heavy between us. "Come into the office," he finally said. "I'll get you some hot coffee. This wiper will take a few minutes to fit." His office was small, a desk covered in papers, an old calendar on the wall, a chair that had seen better days. But when he closed the door behind us, cutting out the sound of the rain outside and the garage next door, it felt like the most intimate place in the world. He handed me a steaming mug of coffee and sat on the edge of the desk, too close to be just professional, too far to be what I wanted. "Can I ask you something?" he said, and there was nervousness in his voice now. "Sure." "Why do you keep coming back?" The question caught me off guard. Not the question itself, but the way he asked it. Vulnerable, hopeful, as if my answer truly mattered. "I already told you," I tried to deflect. "I trust your work. Is that all?" The silence that followed was deafening. Rain beat against the windows. Somewhere in the shop, a tool fell to the floor with a metallic crash. But in here, in this small space, it was just me, him, and a question that could change everything. "No," I admitted, and my voice came out weaker than I wanted. "It's not just that." He closed his eyes for a second, as if processing my answer, deciding what to do with it. When he opened his eyes again, there was something different there, something I hadn't seen before. "I'm married," he said, and the words fell between us like stones. I felt my stomach sink. Of course he was married. Good-looking man, polite, hard-working. Why did I think it would be different? 8 years, he continued, looking at the coffee mug in his hands. Married my high school girlfriend. Everyone expected it. My parents, her parents, the whole town. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, and I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. He raised his eyes to me, and what I saw there made me forget to breathe. "Because every time you show up here, I get more confused. Because when you leave, I keep thinking about when you'll come back. Because I've never felt this way with anyone, and it's driving me crazy." My heart was beating so loud I was sure he could hear it. "And when you showed up today, driving through a storm just to come here," he shook his head. I realized that maybe it's not just me feeling this. "It's not just you," I whispered. The air between us was electrically charged. He got down from the desk, took a step toward me, then stopped, as if fighting against himself. "I don't know what to do with this," he confessed. "I've spent my whole life being who everyone expected me to be. The good son, the faithful husband, the straight guy who fixes cars and watches football on Sundays. But then you show up and what? And nothing makes sense anymore." We stood there, frozen, less than a meter apart, and I could feel gravity pulling us toward each other. But he didn't move, and neither did I. "I need to think," he finally said, running his hand over his face. "All of this, it's a lot. I understand. Your wiper will be ready in 10 minutes. I need to get back to work." He left the office without looking back, leaving me alone with coffee going cold and a racing heart. When I left that time, with the wiper working perfectly and the rain beginning to pass, I was different. It wasn't just a crush anymore. It wasn't just attraction. It was something bigger, more frightening, more real. The following week, I drove past the shop 3 times. I didn't stop. I had no excuse to stop. And more importantly, I didn't know if he wanted me to stop. But on Friday, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "There's a coffee shop near here that I always go to after work, Fridays at 6. If you want to talk, without the excuse of fixing a car, I'll be there." No signature. Didn't need one. I knew who it was. I looked at the message for 5 whole minutes. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, not knowing what to respond. Accepting meant crossing a line. It meant admitting this was more than car repairs and casual conversations. It meant putting a name to what was happening. But refusing? Refusing meant giving up the only thing that had made me feel alive in years. I took a deep breath and typed a single word. "I'll be there." I hit send before I could change my mind. The response came almost instantly. "See you Friday then." 3 words. 3 words that sounded like a promise and a threat at the same time. I put my phone away and looked out the window. It was Thursday. I had less than 24 hours to decide if I was ready for this. For him. For everything this could mean. And the answer, deep down I already knew, was yes. It always was yes. I spent the entire night staring at that paper with the number. Those 10 simple lines written in slanted handwriting. "If you need anything, call me. Or better yet, have coffee with me?" And right below, the cell phone number. It must have been the 10th time I picked up the paper and put it back on the nightstand. My heart was pounding as if I were about to jump off a cliff. And maybe I was. Because accepting that invitation meant admitting something I'd been hiding from myself for weeks. I wanted to see her. God, how I wanted to. But what if I was reading everything wrong? What if that coffee was just coffee? A kind gesture from someone nice? I'd already embarrassed myself enough in life assuming things about people. And this time it would hurt more. At 3 in the morning, I was still awake, spinning the paper between my fingers. The light from the street lamp came through the window, creating shadows on the wall. And I found myself thinking, when did I become this person? Someone so afraid of living that I couldn't even send a simple message. I grabbed my phone. I typed, deleted, typed again. "Hi, it's the Civic customer. Coffee tomorrow at 3 p.m. Simple, straightforward, no expectations." I sent it before I could overthink. The reply came in less than 2 minutes. "Thought you weren't going to call me. There's a coffee shop on Flores Street near the square. I'll wait for you there." And a coffee emoji. A damn coffee emoji that made my stomach tie in knots. I slept maybe an hour that night. The next day, I changed clothes 4 times. 4. Like a teenager going on their first date. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? A date? Or was I, once again, building castles of illusion in my head? I arrived 15 minutes early. The coffee shop was small, with worn wooden tables and that smell of fresh coffee that would normally calm me down. But that day, every cell in my body was on maximum alert. She arrived right on time. And my God. She looked different, without the grease-stained overalls, without the tools hanging from her belt. She wore dark jeans and a blue shirt that brought out her eyes. Her hair, which I always saw tied up or messy, was loose over her shoulders. When she smiled at seeing me, I forgot how to breathe. "Thought you were going to stand me up," she said, pulling out the chair and sitting across from me. "Me? Never." My voice came out hoarser than normal. We ordered coffee. She ordered a double espresso. "Mechanic's vice," she joked. And I ordered a cappuccino that I couldn't even drink properly because my hands were shaking. The first few minutes were light. Conversations about the car, about the weather, about the coffee shop. But there was something different in the air. An electricity that didn't exist at the shop, surrounded by cars and the noise of tools. Here, it was just the two of us. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly, absent-mindedly stirring her cup. "Sure. Why did you always stare at me when you came to pick up your car?" My face burned. "I wasn't staring." "Yes, you were." She smiled, but there was a vulnerability in that smile I'd never seen before. Not that I minded, I just wanted to understand why. And there it was, the moment of truth. I could lie, make up some excuse. But when I looked into her eyes, all the courage I'd been storing for weeks finally found its voice. "Because you're different from anyone I've ever met," I said. And the honesty of those words physically hurt. And I couldn't stop thinking about you since the first time we talked. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. She didn't look away, just held the cup tighter, as if she needed something solid to lean on. "You know that she started, and stopped, took a deep breath. "I'm not exactly the kind of person most people expect a mechanic to be." "What do you mean?" She looked around, checking if anyone was listening, then leaned forward, her voice low and laden with something that seemed like fear. "When I was 18, I fell in love with my best friend," she said, and each word seemed to cost her a piece of her soul. "We were together for 2 years, in secret, because where I grew up, that kind of thing wasn't accepted." My heart raced. "My family found out," she continued, her eyes getting moist. "My dad gave me an ultimatum. Either I broke up with her and went back to normal, or I left home. I was 20 years old. I had no money, nowhere to go." "What did you do?" I whispered. "I broke up." She wiped the corner of her eye, quickly, as if ashamed of her own emotion. "I broke up and pretended to be who they wanted me to be for 3 years, until I couldn't take it anymore and came here. Started over, alone. Learned to fix cars because it was the only thing that made me feel in control of something in my life." I reached my hand across the table, without thinking, just needing to touch her, needing her to know she wasn't alone. She looked at my hand, hesitated, and then, slowly, placed hers over mine. The touch was electric, warm, real. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice almost failing. "Because I need you to know who I am before." She stopped, her eyes fixed on mine. "Before you decide if you want to keep getting to know me." "You think that would change anything?" I said, and my fingers intertwined with hers without me commanding them to. "You think I would have come here if I wasn't willing to risk everything for a chance to truly know you?" Her eyes shone, not with tears, with something deeper. Hope, relief. "You don't know what you're getting into," she whispered. "Then show me." We stayed there, hands intertwined on the table, while the world kept spinning around us. People came and went from the coffee shop. Cars passed by outside, but none of it mattered. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't pretending. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't afraid. When we finished our coffee, she suggested we walk. There's a square nearby. It's quiet at this hour. We left the coffee shop side by side, no longer separated by service counters or car hoods, just two people walking together, so close our arms touched with each step. The square was almost empty. Some children were playing on the playground, an elderly couple sitting on a bench feeding pigeons, and us. We walked in circles, talking about everything and nothing at the same time. She told me about her childhood in the countryside, about how she always felt different but never understood why, about the first time she noticed she looked at girls in a way her friends didn't. And I told her about myself, about the sleepless nights questioning my own identity, about the paralyzing fear of disappointing the people I loved, about that feeling of always wearing a mask. "Have you told anyone?" she asked when we stopped under a large tree, its shade covering us from the afternoon sun. "No," I admitted. "You're the first person I've spoken about this out loud." She turned to me. We were so close I could see the small golden flecks in her brown eyes, could feel the warmth of her body, could hear her breathing getting faster. "Are you that afraid?" she whispered. "I'm afraid of losing everything," I confessed, my voice breaking. "My family, my friends, people's respect, everything." "What if you gain something much greater?" she asked, raising her hand, and slowly, so slowly, I could have stopped it if I wanted, touched my face. "What if you gain yourself?" My eyes burned, not from pain, from recognition, from truth. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," I whispered. "You are," she said, and there was a certainty in her voice that made me want to believe. "You just need someone by your side to remind you of that." We stood there, frozen in time, her hand on my face, my eyes on hers, the entire world reduced to this single moment, this single shared breath. And then she said the words that changed everything. "Come with me." "Where?" "To my place." She lowered her hand but didn't pull away. "I want to show you who I really am. Without fear, without masks, just me." My heart stopped, because that invitation wasn't just to go to her house. It was an invitation to cross a line from which there was no return. It was an invitation to choose between safety and truth, between the life I knew and the life I could have, between continuing to pretend or finally allowing myself to feel. "If I go," I said, my voice trembling, "if I cross that door with you, I don't know if I'll be able to turn back." She smiled, a smile both sad and hopeful at the same time. "I know. That's why I'm asking. Because I need you to be sure. I need you to know that once you truly enter my life, I won't let you go easily." The tears finally fell. Silent. Liberating. "I don't want to turn back," I whispered. "I just need courage." "Then give me your hand," she said, extending hers. And there, under that tree, surrounded by a world that remained indifferent to the most important moment of my life, I made the choice. I took her hand and didn't let go. I looked into those brown eyes full of expectation, and something inside me broke. Not in the sense of pain, but in the sense of release, as if all the layers of protection I had built over the years crumbled all at once. "Okay," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "I'll take that coffee." The smile that lit up his face was devastating. There's no other word. It was like watching the sun rise after an endless night. We entered through the side door of the shop, the one that leads to the office in the back. I had seen that door 1,000 times, but had never walked through it. It was strange, as if I were crossing a portal to another world. The office was small, cramped even. A metal desk covered in papers, an old leather sofa with cracked upholstery against the wall, an electric coffee maker on top of a steel filing cabinet. It smelled of motor oil mixed with strong coffee, a combination that somehow made sense. "Sorry about the mess," he said, removing some mechanics manuals from the sofa. "I don't usually have visitors here." "It's fine," I replied, sitting on the edge of the sofa. My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. He poured 2 cups of coffee into dented aluminum mugs. handed me one and sat next to me, leaving minimal space between us. So close I could feel the warmth of his body, the smell of grease mixed with the honest sweat of work. "You know," he began, looking at the mug in his hands, "I was never very good with words. My thing is engines, oil, bolts. Things you fix with your hands." I stayed silent, waiting. "But there are some things you can't fix like that," he continued. "There are some things you carry inside you, that you keep trying to hide, trying to fix on your own, but it doesn't work." He lifted his eyes and looked directly at me. That intense gaze, vulnerable, completely exposed. "I spent my whole life pretending," he said, and his voice trembled. "Pretending to be what everyone expected. The tough mechanic, the guy who drinks beer with his buddies, who talks about women, who lives the life a man should live in this town." My chest tightened. I knew exactly where this was going, but at the same time I knew nothing. "But when you showed up here for the first time," he continued, "with those neat work clothes of yours, your polite manner, your curious eyes, I felt something I'd never felt in my life." "What did you feel?" I asked, my voice coming out hoarser than I expected. He set his mug on the floor and turned his body completely toward me. Our knees touched. It was an electric touch. "The desire to stop pretending," he said, and a single tear ran down his face. "The desire to be who I really am, even if it means losing everything." I felt my own breath catch. "I'm not straight," he said, and the words came out like a confession torn from the depths. I never was. I spent 35 years lying to myself, trying to be what this town, my father, my friends expected of me. But I can't anymore. Not after meeting you. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the low hum of the refrigerator in the corner, the tick-tock of a clock on the wall, my own uneven breathing. I began, but the words died in my throat. "You don't have to say anything," he said quickly, wiping the tear with the back of his grease-stained hand. "I just needed you to know. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Every time you came here, every time you smiled at me, every damn time you accidentally touched my arm. It was torture and a gift at the same time." I set my mug on the floor, next to his. My hands were shaking. "You're not the only one who was pretending," I said, and my voice came out steady this time. Steady and true. He looked at me, surprised. "I spent my whole life building an acceptable version of myself," I confessed. "The serious guy, focused on work, who doesn't get involved with anyone, who keeps emotional distance from everything and everyone. You know why?" "Why?" he whispered. "Because if I let someone really get close, they'd discover who I really am." "And I was afraid of that," I said, feeling my eyes burn. "Until I met you." "And who are you?" he asked, so quietly I could barely hear. "I'm someone who spent the last 3 months making up excuses to come to this garage," I said, and a trembling smile formed on my lips. "Someone who changes his car's oil every month, even knowing it doesn't need it. Someone who stays up at night thinking about a brown-eyed mechanic who smiles like the world has no evil in it." He let out a wet, emotional laugh. "I stay up thinking about you too," he confessed. "Every night, wondering if you felt the same, if I was going crazy, if it was possible that someone like you would look at someone like me and see something beyond a grease-stained mechanic." "I see everything," I said, my voice breaking. "I see the way you treat your employees with respect, the patience you have explaining every detail of the repair, the honesty in your eyes when you say something can wait another month. I see a good man, true, brave." "Brave?" He laughed without humor. "I spent 35 years hiding. And now you're here," I said, being completely honest with me, "knowing you could lose everything. Isn't that courage?" He closed his eyes, took a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was a new determination there, a decision made. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and the world stopped. It wasn't a rhetorical question. It wasn't a dramatic movie move. It was a genuine question, loaded with fear and hope in equal measure. It was the bravest man I'd ever met offering me the most precious thing he had, his truth. Yes, I said. 1,000 times yes. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind, for the reality of what was happening to fully settle in. But I didn't want to change my mind. I wanted this more than I'd wanted anything in my life. When his lips touched mine, it was like everything made sense for the first time. It wasn't a movie kiss. It wasn't perfect and coordinated. It was awkward, trembling, wet with tears I didn't even know were mine or his. But it was the truest kiss of my life. He placed his hand on the back of my neck, and I felt calluses from years of hard work against my skin. I brought my hand to his face, feeling the stubble, the cheekbone, the jawline. Everything I'd imagined 1,000 times and never had the courage to touch. We kissed with the hunger of those who'd been hungry their whole lives, with the desperation of those who thought they'd never be able to be who they really are, with the gratitude of those who found another castaway on the same desert island. When we finally pulled apart, we were breathless. He rested his forehead against mine, our noses touching, our eyes closed. "Is this real?" he whispered. "It is," I said. "This is the realest thing in my life." I don't know how long we stayed like that. Could have been seconds, could have been hours. Time didn't exist anymore in that cramped office that smelled like coffee and motor oil. Eventually, he pulled back a bit, just enough to look into my eyes. "And now?" he asked, and for the first time I heard real fear in his voice. "What do we do now?" And it was that question that brought reality crashing back with brutal force. Because it was one thing to confess feelings in a closed office, something completely different to face the world outside. "I don't know," I admitted, honestly. "I don't know how we make this work. This town," he began, and didn't need to finish. I knew. This was a small town, where everyone knows everyone, where reputations are built over decades and destroyed in seconds, where a respected mechanic could become a joke overnight, where a serious professional could lose clients just by association. "I have the business," he said, looking around the office as if seeing everything he'd built over the years. 15 employees who depend on me, a reputation that took 20 years to build. If people find out. "I know," I said, because I really did know. "And you?" he asked. "You have your career, your whole organized and respectable life." "I know," I repeated. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of pure frustration. "So what do we do?" he asked again, this time with urgency. "Do we go back out there and pretend this never happened? Go back to the comfortable lie?" I took his hand, interlacing our fingers. His hand was rough, calloused, strong. Mine was soft, cared for, smaller. But they fit together perfectly. "I don't know how to do that again," I confessed. "Now that I've tasted the truth, I don't know how to go back to the lie." "Me neither," he said, squeezing my hand. "But I'm scared." "Me too." We sat there, on that old couch, holding hands, two men equally terrified and in love. That's when we heard the shop door slam up front. Voices, customers arriving. We let go instinctively, too fast, too guilty. The gesture was automatic, conditioned by years of hiding. And it hurt. It hurt so much. He stood up, smoothed his clothes, wiped his face, became the professional, controlled mechanic again, the mask rising back up. "I have to go," he said, but didn't move. "I know," I said, also standing up. We looked at each other there, in the middle of that office, and I saw the same pain in his eyes that I felt in my chest. The pain of having tasted freedom and having to return to prison. "Tonight," he said suddenly, could you come to my place tonight? We need to talk properly, decide what we're going to do." "I can," I said. He scribbled an address on a piece of paper and handed it to me. Our fingers touched briefly, and it was like an electric shock again. 8 o'clock, he said. "I'll be there." He nodded, took a deep breath, and opened the office door. The noise from the shop invaded our safe space like an avalanche. Employee laughter, radio music, the metallic sound of tools, the real world demanding our attention back. I left through the side door without passing through the main shop area. We hadn't agreed on this, but we both knew it was necessary. We weren't ready for curious looks yet. When I got to my car, my hands were shaking so much I had trouble getting the key in the ignition. I sat there for a moment, just breathing, trying to process what had just happened. I had kissed him. He had kissed me. We had confessed true, vulnerable, deep feelings. And now we needed to decide what to do with that. As I drove back to my apartment, my mind spun in circles. Part of me was euphoric, floating, still feeling the pressure of his lips on mine. Another part was terrified, calculating risks, imagining consequences. What happens when two people decide to stop lying in a town that's built on comfortable lies? What happens when you choose your happiness, knowing it could cost everything you've built? These questions haunted me the rest of the day. While I showered, while I tried to eat something and couldn't swallow, while I changed clothes 3 times trying to decide what to wear to go to his place. Because at 8 o'clock I was going to have to make decisions. We were going to have to make decisions. And there was no easy option, no path without pain. But when I looked at the clock and saw it was 7:45, I grabbed my car keys without hesitation. Because for the first time in my life, I had tasted what it was like to be true. And no matter how much fear I felt, no matter the risks, I couldn't go back to the lie. Not after having lived a moment of pure truth. So I drove through town toward the address he'd given me, with my heart racing and my hands sweating, not knowing what I'd find on the other side of that door, but knowing, deep in my soul, that I had to find out. Because some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. And I had just thrown mine wide open. The night I spent with Raphael after the confession was one of the most intense of my life. We barely slept. We talked until dawn, planning a future that finally seemed possible. He talked about opening his own garage someday. I talked about going back to school, maybe studying business administration. They were simple dreams, but for the first time in my life, I could see myself in them. See myself happy. When the sun started to rise, I knew I'd have to go back home. My mother expected me to show up for Sunday breakfast. It was tradition, and even with everything that had changed inside me that night, the world out there remained exactly the same. Raphael hugged me at his front door, a long, tight embrace, as if he wanted to etch that moment into his skin. And then he said something that scared me. "Are you going to tell your family?" The question hit like a bucket of cold water. I was still floating in the euphoria of the confession, in the feeling of finally having been honest with myself and with him. But tell my family? That was something completely different. I don't know. I need to think. He nodded, but I saw something shift in his eyes. A shadow of disappointment, perhaps. Or fear. Fear that this night was just one night. Fear that when daylight hit, I'd go back into the closet and close the door. When I got home, my mother was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee filled my nostrils, bringing me back to the reality of my everyday life. My father was already sitting at the table, reading the newspaper. My younger brother was on his phone, bored. "Good morning, Mom." "Good morning, son. I thought you weren't going to make it. Where did you spend the night?" The question was innocent, routine. But to me, in that moment, it sounded like an accusation. I felt my heart racing. My mind started working at high speed, searching for an excuse, a plausible lie. I stayed at a friend's place. We had a few drinks. I thought it was better not to drive. A lie. The first of many to come, I realized. And each lie was like a small betrayal of the moment Raphael and I had shared hours before. I had promised him and myself that I would be honest, that I wouldn't hide who I was anymore. But there, sitting at the Sunday table with my family, I realized the size of the gap between the promise and reality. My father lowered the newspaper and looked at me. "What friend?" "From college. You don't know him." He nodded and went back to the paper. My mother served the coffee. Everything went back to normal. And it was exactly this normality that tore me in half at that moment. Because I wasn't normal anymore. I had changed. But they didn't know. And I didn't have the courage to tell them. The following days were the hardest of my life. Raphael and I talked every day, but always in secret. Deleted messages, calls at strategic times, made up excuses to leave the house. It was exhausting. And worse, it was everything I had promised I wouldn't do anymore. On Thursday of that week, something happened that forced me to face the situation. I was at the supermarket with my mother, helping with the monthly shopping. It was an activity I usually hated, but that day I agreed just to get out of the house and stop thinking. We were in the cleaning aisle when I saw him, Raphael, on the other side of the aisle, choosing detergent. Our eyes met. For a second, the whole world stopped. I saw the smile beginning to form on his face, that smile that melted me inside. And then I saw the smile die when he realized who was with me. I made a discreet gesture with my head, like, "Not now," and quickly turned away. I went back to paying attention to the shelves, pretending to choose fabric softener. "Do you know that young man?" My mother had seen the exchange of glances. "Which one?" "There, in the red shirt." My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. "Oh, that's the mechanic who fixed my car." "What a handsome young man," she commented casually, going back to pushing the cart. Handsome. She was right. Raphael was beautiful, and I was denying knowing him. I was pretending he was just the mechanic. Nothing more. When I looked back, Raphael was already gone, but the image of his face, of that smile that died, stayed etched in my mind for the rest of the day. That night, he called me. His voice was different. Cold. Distant. "We need to talk." We agreed to meet at the same bar where it all began. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting in a dark corner, nervously fidgeting with his beer glass. I sat across from him. "Hi." "Hi." The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable. I knew what was coming. "Today, at the supermarket," he began, without looking into my eyes, "you pretended you didn't know me. Raphael, my mother was right next to me. I couldn't." "Couldn't what? Say hi to me? Acknowledge me? I didn't ask you to shout from the rooftops that we're together. I just wanted, I don't know, some acknowledgement that I exist." The pain in his voice was palpable, and I had no defense. He was right. "I'm sorry, I'm still trying to process all of this." "Process what? The fact that you like men? Or the fact that you like me?" "Both. It's a lot all at once, Raphael. My entire family has no idea who I am. How am I supposed to just show up and tell them?" He finally looked at me, and in his eyes I saw not just pain, but exhaustion. "You're going to have to decide what you want, because I can't handle being your secret." "You're not my secret." "Then what am I? Because today, in front of your mother, I was just the mechanic, and that hurts. It hurts more than you can imagine." I felt my chest tighten. He was right, about everything. But fear was stronger than logic. Fear of being rejected, of losing my family, of being exposed in a small town where everyone knows everyone. "Give me time, please." Raphael shook his head, defeated. "How much time? A week? A month? A year? Because I've already lived hiding my whole life. And when I met you, I thought I could finally be myself. But it seems like I'm the only one who changed." Those words were like a punch to the gut, because he was right. I had promised change. I had promised honesty. But at the first opportunity, at the first difficult situation, I had gone back to lying. "I love you." The words came out before I could control them, but they were true. Deeply true. Raphael closed his eyes, as if those words hurt more than they helped. "I love you too. But love without courage is just suffering." He stood up, left some bills on the table, and walked out. I stayed there, sitting alone, feeling the weight of every word he had said. Love without courage is just suffering. I spent the next 3 days in a state of silent desperation. Raphael didn't answer my messages, didn't take my calls. I had lost him, and worse, I knew it was my fault. On Saturday morning, I woke up with my decision made. I couldn't live like this anymore, divided between two worlds, two versions of myself. Either I chose honesty and risked losing everything, or I chose lies and lost myself and Raphael. I went to the kitchen. It was Saturday, so the whole family was home. My dad making coffee. My mom organizing the fridge. My brother on the couch, watching TV. I need to talk to you all. It's important. My mom stopped what she was doing. My dad turned off the stove. My brother lowered the TV volume. Everyone looked at me, curious, worried. I sat at the table. My hands were shaking. My heart was beating so hard I was sure they could hear it. I met someone. My mom smiled. That's wonderful, son. What's her name? I took a deep breath. It was now or never. Him. His name is Raphael. The silence that followed was deafening. I saw my mom's expression change. Confusion. Then understanding. Then shock. My dad froze, his face unreadable. My brother looked at me with wide eyes. Him? You meant her, right? My mom was still trying to convince herself she had misunderstood. No, Mom. Him. Raphael. I'm gay. I always have been. And I fell in love with him. The words came out rushed, but they came out. And as soon as they did, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. A weight I had been carrying for years. My whole life. My dad was the first to speak. Is this a joke? No, Dad. It's the truth. He got up from his chair. I saw the anger starting to form on his face. No. Not in my house. You're not going to bring this shame into my house. Shame? I repeated the word, feeling it burn. Loving someone is shameful? You know very well what I'm talking about. What will people say? What will the neighbors think? And there it was, the truth behind the anger. It wasn't about me, it was about them, about the image they had built, about their reputation. My mom started crying. Where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? Those words cut me deeper than my dad's anger, because they came from a place of pain, of misunderstanding, but also of distorted love. You didn't do anything wrong, Mom. I'm just who I am, and it's not a choice. It never was. Then unchoose it, my dad shouted. You're going to stop this madness right now. You're going to forget this man, and you're going to live a normal life. Normal for who? For you? What about me? When do I get to be normal for myself? As long as you live in this house, you'll live by my rules. I looked at him, at my mom, at my brother, who remained silent, processing everything, and I made the hardest decision of my life. Then I'm not living in this house anymore. My mom sobbed. You're not serious. I am. I love you. I always will. But I can't keep living a lie just to make you happy. I need to live my truth. And if you can't accept that, then I need to leave. My dad pointed to the door. Then go. But don't come back. If you walk out that door, you're no longer my son. Those words should have destroyed me, and they destroyed a part of me. But they also freed another part, the part that had been trapped for years, the part that was dying from hiding so much. I went to my room, grabbed a backpack, put in some clothes, documents, the essentials. Each movement was mechanical, automatic. My mind was somewhere else. I was thinking about Raphael, about everything he had said. Love without courage is just suffering. When I came down the stairs with the rucksack on my back, my mom was sitting on the couch, crying. My dad was in the kitchen, his back turned. My brother came up to me. Are you really going? Yes. He hugged me. It was quick, but it was real. I don't judge you, mate. Just look after yourself, yeah? That hug almost made me fall apart, but I held it together. I nodded, and I walked out the door. I got in the car and drove aimlessly for a few minutes. My mind was blank. My heart was broken. But there was something different. A strange feeling. Freedom. Pain and freedom at the same time. When I came to, I was in front of Raphael's garage. It was Saturday, so it was closed. But his house was in the back. I parked and walked to the door. I knocked. Once. Twice. The door opened. Raphael was there, in shorts and without a shirt. His eyes swollen as if he too had spent the last week crying. I told my family, I said before he could say anything. I told them about you, about us, And my father threw me out of the house. Raphael looked at me, processing the information. You did that? I did, because you were right. Love without courage is just suffering, and I choose courage. I choose you. I choose us. He took a step forward and hugged me. A tight, desperate hug, like he was clinging to a lifeline. And maybe he was. Maybe we both were. Are you sure about this? He whispered in my ear. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. And then he kissed me. A kiss different from all the others. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't desperate. It was peaceful. Like we were finally in the right place. You can stay here, he said when we pulled apart. As long as you need. Forever, if you want. I smiled. For the first time in days, I smiled for real. I want to. I walked into his house, left my backpack on the floor, and for the first time since everything had started, I felt like I was home. Not because of the structure, not because of the walls, but because of the person. Raphael was my home now. We spent the rest of the day talking about the future, about the challenges still to come. Because I knew this wasn't the end of the problems. It was just the beginning. My family would still need time to process. The small town would still talk. People would still judge. But for the first time, I wasn't alone. And that made all the difference. That night, lying in bed, Raphael held my hand. Do you have any idea how brave you were today? I shook my head. It wasn't courage. It was desperation. Desperation not to lose you. Still, you did something that many people spend their whole lives unable to do. You chose your happiness. I chose my happiness. Those words echoed inside me. Yes, I had chosen. And even with all the pain, with all the loss, I didn't regret it. But part of me still wondered, what now? What comes after the choice? How do we build a life when everything we knew has been left behind? Raphael seemed to read my thoughts. We'll figure it out together, one day at a time. And there, in that simple answer, I found the peace I was looking for. We didn't need to have all the answers now. We didn't need to know exactly what the future would be like. We just needed the courage to take the next step. And the certainty that, whatever happened, we would be together. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not other people's approval. Not the security of a home that conditioned love on lies. But truth, honesty, and the courage to live authentically, even when the whole world seemed to be against us. I had lost my family that day, or at least the version of the family I knew. But I had gained something far more valuable. I had gained myself, and I had gained someone who loved me exactly as I was. And as I fell asleep in Raphael's arms, one last question lingered in my mind. What would it be like to face the world out there? What would it be like to live openly, without hiding, in a town where everyone knew us? But that answer, I would discover tomorrow. For today, it was enough to be here, safe, loved, and finally, free. Courage is a strange thing. You can spend years preparing for a moment, rehearsing the words in your head 1,000 times, imagining every possible scenario. But when the time comes, all that matters is the hand holding yours. That Friday evening, as we drove to my family's house, Danilo held my right hand while I drove with my left. His fingers were ice cold, despite the April warmth. So were mine. Are you sure? He asked for the third time in 15 minutes. I glanced at him quickly before returning my eyes to the road. His face was tense, but determined. The same expression he had when facing an impossible engine, when he knew he'd have to dig deep to really fix the problem. Yes, I answered. I'm tired of hiding. Tired of pretending you're just my mechanic when they ask about the Toyota. Tired of dying a little each time I have to lie about where I spent the weekend. He squeezed my hand tighter. What if they don't accept it? Then at least they'll know the truth, I said, feeling the words gain strength as they left my mouth. They'll know who I really am, and who I love. Dinner was set for 8. My mother had insisted on making lasagna, my favorite dish since childhood. She didn't know I was bringing Danilo. She didn't know anything, actually. Just that I needed to talk to the family about something important. When I parked in front of the house, I could see the lounge lights on, the shadows of my parents and my sister moving behind the curtains. Such a familiar scene. So ordinary. How many times had I arrived there before? How many times had I walked through that door pretending to be someone I wasn't? "Breathe," Danilo said, his voice soft but firm. "I'm here. No matter what happens in there, I'm here." We got out of the car together. We didn't let go of each other's hands. My mother opened the door before I could even ring the bell. She had that wide smile, the floral apron she'd worn since I could remember, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. The smile faltered when she saw Danilo by my side, our fingers intertwined. "Hi, Mum," I said, my voice coming out firmer than I expected. "This is Danilo, my boyfriend." Silence. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. My mother looking at our joined hands, Danilo beside me with his breath suspended, me feeling my heart beating so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. Then my father appeared behind her in the doorway. "The mechanic?" he asked, his voice neutral, impossible to read. "Yes," I answered. "The mechanic." My sister emerged right behind him, her eyes wide. She looked at me, then at Danilo, then at our still joined hands. And then, to my complete surprise, she smiled. A small smile, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "Are you going to stand on the doorstep all night or are you coming in?" she said. "The lasagna is getting cold." It was my mother who moved first, taking a step to the side. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't crying either. She was just processing. We went inside. Dinner was strange. I won't lie and say it was perfect, because it wasn't. There were long, uncomfortable silences. There were moments when my mother looked away when Danilo and I looked at each other. There were difficult questions and even more difficult answers. But there was also my sister making nervous jokes to break the tension. There was my father, at the end of the night, shaking Danilo's hand and saying, "Look after him, won't you?" There was my mother at the door, as we were leaving, hugging me tight and whispering in my ear, "It'll take time, but we'll get there." It wasn't total acceptance, but it was a beginning. When we got back to the car, Danilo pulled me into a hug before I started the engine. He was trembling, or maybe it was me. Maybe it was both of us. "You were incredible," he said against my neck. "We were," I corrected. I drove back to the apartment in silence, but it was a different silence now. It wasn't the heavy silence of fear, of the unspoken thing. It was the silence of exhaustion after a battle won, or at least not lost. But the night wasn't over yet. "Take me to the garage," Danilo said when we were almost at my flat. "Now? It's almost 11. "Now," he confirmed, that crooked smile I loved lighting up his face. "I need to check something." 10 minutes later, I was parking in front of the garage. The place was dark, empty, completely different from the chaos of cars and customers it usually had during the day. Danilo opened the gate with the key he always carried in his pocket and guided me inside. "What do you need to check?" I asked as he turned on only a few lights, leaving the garage in cozy dimness. He turned to me, leaning against the tool bench, that same place where everything had started months ago. "Your oil," he said, serious, but with eyes shining with something that wasn't just humor. I laughed. I couldn't help it. "My oil?" "Yeah," he said, moving closer, reducing the space between us with each step. "I think it's time for a complete inspection. Check if everything's running properly, if there's nothing that needs special attention." I understood the game. I understood perfectly. "And what do you recommend?" I asked, my voice coming out lower, more intimate. "As a professional mechanic?" He was inches from me now, so close I could feel his warmth, the smell of grease and soap that had become my favorite smell in the world. "I recommend," he said slowly, his hands finding my waist, "a thorough inspection, complete, no rush." I laughed again, but the sound died when he kissed me. It wasn't like the hurried kisses in my flat, watching the door afraid someone would arrive. It wasn't like the hidden kisses in his car, parked on deserted streets where no one knew us. It was a different kiss. It was a free kiss. When we pulled apart, breathless, leaning on the same bench where he'd first offered me coffee, he smiled against my lips. "Remember the first time you came here?" he asked. "How could I forget? You were covered in grease and barely looked at me." "I looked," he corrected. "I looked a lot. I just tried not to make it obvious." "You failed miserably." He laughed, that low laugh I felt reverberating in his chest. "When you left that day, I kept thinking about you for hours," he confessed. "I tried to concentrate on the other cars, but I could only think about the next customer who would show up pretending they had a problem with their Toyota just to see me again." "It wasn't pretending," I protested. "The car really was making noise." "It was a loose bolt, love. A bolt. 15 minutes of work at most. And you made it last 3 hours." "Because I didn't want you to leave," he said, serious now. Even without fully understanding why yet, I already knew I didn't want you to leave. I held his face between my hands, forcing him to look me in the eyes. "Well, I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." "Even if your family needs time?" "Even if they need forever," I affirmed. "They'll have to learn to live with it, because you're not a phase, Danilo. You're not a rebellion or a mistake. You're the first right thing I've chosen for myself in my entire life." He kissed me again, and this time there was no urgency, no fear. There was just the two of us, in that place where everything had started, finally free to be exactly who we were. We stayed there for a time I can't measure. It could have been minutes or hours. Eventually, we settled on the small worn sofa in the corner of the garage, the one Danilo used to rest between jobs. I was lying against him, listening to his heartbeat calm down, his fingers tracing distracted patterns on my arm. "You know this won't be easy, right?" he said softly. "I know. People will talk. They'll stare. Some of my customers might stop coming here. And some will keep coming because you're the best mechanic in town," I finished. "And you'll gain new customers. People who don't care who you love, only about the quality of your work." "Optimistic. Realistic," I corrected. "And even if you lose all your customers, even if things get tough, we'll figure it out. Together." He was silent for a moment before speaking again. "You know what's funny? I spent years in this garage, fixing car after car, keeping my head down, doing my work. Never thought much about happiness, you know. Just about survival. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. And now? Now I wake up thinking about you. I work thinking about when you'll show up to keep me company at lunch. I fall asleep thinking about what it's like to have you in my arms." He held me a little tighter. "You taught me that I deserved more than just surviving. You taught me that I could truly live." I felt my eyes burning. "You did the same thing for me," I said, my voice choking. "Before I met you, I was so lost, Danilo. So trapped in a version of myself that wasn't real. I'd go to work, pretend to be interested in the right conversations, date the right people, do all the right things, and I was absolutely miserable. And now?" I lifted my head to look at him, at those brown eyes that had become my safe haven. "Now I'm doing everything wrong, by my family's standards. I'm dating the mechanic. I'm embracing who I really am. I'm choosing my happiness over their approval." I smiled through the tears that were beginning to fall. "And I've never felt more certain about anything in my life." Danilo wiped my tears with his thumb, his own eyes glistening with moisture. "We're going to be okay," he said, and it wasn't a question. It was a promise. "We will," I agreed. We left the garage when the early morning hours were already advanced. Danilo locked everything carefully, double-checking that the gates were secure, like he always did. Habits of someone who built everything from scratch, who knows the value of each tool, of each inch of that space. In the car, before starting the engine, he took my hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being brave. For making me want to be brave too. For showing up here months ago with that Toyota and that ridiculous excuse about engine noise." I laughed, intertwining our fingers. Thank you for seeing through the ridiculous excuse and for taking 3 hours to tighten a bolt. I drove back home with his hand in mine, the radio playing softly, the empty early morning streets unfolding before us. And for the first time in so long, I wasn't thinking about all the obstacles yet to come, about all the difficult conversations we'd still have to have, about all the judgment we'd still face. I was just thinking about how good it was to be there, in that moment with that person. How good it was to finally breathe. There are moments in life when you look back and realize exactly when everything changed. For me, it was on a Tuesday afternoon, when I walked into a mechanic's garage looking for someone to fix my car and found someone who fixed my life. No, that's not right. Danilo didn't fix me. I wasn't broken. I was just lost. And he was the person who held up a torch in the dark and said, "This way. The path is this way." Today, 6 months after that first meeting at the garage, I wake up with him by my side. I drink coffee while he tells me about the cars he'll be working on that day. I kiss him at the door before leaving for work, without worrying if the neighbors will see. My mother is still learning. My father still asks strange questions, but my sister has already asked when the official introduction barbecue will be. Already suggested we travel together on holiday. Some friends drifted away, others grew closer. I discovered who really cared about me, and who only cared about the version of me I pretended to be. And the garage? The garage is still busy, because people can think whatever they want about Danilo's personal life, but when their car makes a strange noise, they know exactly where to find the best mechanic in town. The other day, I took the Toyota in for its 50,000-kilometer service. Danilo spent the entire afternoon with his head under the bonnet, checking every system, every fluid, every detail. When he finished, he came to me with that crooked smile. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Everything perfect," he answered. "But I think you should come back next week, just to make sure." Make sure of what? He leaned in, stealing a quick kiss despite being in the middle of the garage, with 2 assistant mechanics working just a few feet away. "Make sure I see you again," he said, without a trace of shame or fear. And I laughed. I laughed because it was ridiculous and perfect at the same time. I laughed because we were there, in that same place where it had all started. But everything was different now. We didn't need excuses anymore. We didn't need to hide anymore. "Actually," Danilo said, suddenly serious, "there's something I want to ask you." My heart raced. "What?" He stuck his hand in the pocket of his grease-stained jeans and pulled out a small key. "Do you want a copy of the garage key? So you can come in whenever you want, even when I'm not here." I looked at the key in the palm of his hand. It wasn't a ring. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It was better. It was real. It was him telling me that I had a place in his world, always. "Yes," I said, taking the key and closing my hand around it. 1,000 times yes. That night, after the garage closed, we stayed there again. Danilo taught me how to change a car's oil the right way, guiding me step by step, laughing when I spilled some on the floor. "You're a terrible mechanic," he said, pulling me into a hug that covered me in grease. "Good thing I have a good one to teach me," I replied. And as we stood there, in the middle of that garage that smelled of oil and metal and possibility, I understood something. True love isn't finding someone perfect. It's finding someone who makes you want to be honest, who makes you want to stop pretending, who makes you want to be exactly who you are, with all your flaws and fears and imperfections. Danilo gave me that, and I gave the same thing back to him. I don't know what the future will bring. I don't know if my family will ever fully accept it. I don't know if we'll face more difficulties, more prejudice, more pain. But I know I'll face all of it with his hand in mine. And in the end, perhaps that's all that matters. Finding someone who makes you want to be brave. Finding someone who's worth the fear. Finding someone who, when they ask if they can check your oil, is really asking if they can check your heart. And having the courage to say yes.